Hi, John and Nicola and everybody, all the artists here. I'm so glad that you're here tonight. And then today is the first open mic for print art. So because after all this lockdown time, and we just can't wait to be able to get together. So yeah, I'm so glad you guys are all here. And so tonight it's me, Coral, and then Renee. We will both be sharing, and so the subject is really interesting me. It's the transition from digital to analog, or vice versa, from analog to digital. And you know, like this 2 years of COVID, we are all transitioning. So today I'm going to share a little bit about myself and how I transition from digital world to the analog. So before I become a full-time painter, I've been doing it for 2 years now. I was a filmmaker, professional filmmaker for 15 years. So I work in live action and animation. I was trained in the classical Hollywood filmmaking in Southern California. I went to University of Southern California. So we are trained to make films like, blockbuster films like Star Wars or Schindler's List, like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they were our alumni. So we were on the pathway to our classroom. There was one line there saying that reality ends here. So I was in America for about 10 years. I was very fortunate, so I got to work on many different projects, from documentaries to feature films to children's programming. I really love to do children's TV shows and animation. And that animation is what brought me to New Zealand. I never thought that I will be able to come to New Zealand, live in this beautiful country, meet all these incredible people. And I heard that actually New Zealand has the highest rate of artists. I mean, capital, person or whatever, because it's so beautiful, right? So, so I cannot escape the statistics. I need to become artist too. So, so I was very privileged to be able to travel, like making documentaries in Switzerland. I've also made a documentary in refugee camps in Thailand. So I've always been very drawn to human interest story. And that's probably why I also like to do portraiture, especially women. I find giving women a voice, is very important. So I came to New Zealand in 2015. I was working on several projects, animation projects. And then I also got sent to China, Beijing and Guangzhou, to do co-production. So in 2019, we finished $20 million US dollar feature film. So that's one of the biggest projects I've ever worked. And it was very stressful. It was really incredible because we got to work with talents from like Weta, from Disney, from Pixar, we have 300 people crew, I learned so much from all the animators because they love to study everything. Like, for example, our studio is in a farm. Then one day the producer just came out and say, we have several piglets got born, but the one died. And then so he just brought this bucket with the dead piglet. And he just said, who wants to come and examine and see the skin color and what it looks like. And so all the animators, the texture artists, they all came and say, yeah, well, look at this. It's so amazing. And then if there's a hailstorm coming, and everybody will, rush out to the deck and just go to see the hail, because so I just really love it because there's such a excitement about learning, observing the nature and people, and so hanging out with the animators are really incredible. Like even when I was in China, and China is very, very slow in certain aspect. You just spend hours in the phone company trying to get your account set up. But the animators, they are very cool and they are very chill because they would be like sketching people. I'll draw a Mickey Mouse, and give to a little girl, something like that. It was just really amazing how they merge art with their life. So there are a lot of many beautiful parts about making films with a big team. However, something happened with me, and then so in 2019, I made a very big decision to try something different, give myself a break. What happened was actually after 7 years, I was really actually worn out. My role as a creative director, I have to do a lot of business side of things, and it was just not very satisfying. And I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with insomnia. A lot of times I need to take pills to be able to sleep. And so in 2019, we finished this big movie, and the contract was finished. And I had offer to do another very demanding job. And then I went for the interview. When I come back, I was thinking, am I supposed to keep taking pills? And I heard this little child in me and just said, please don't do this to us anymore, And then and I heard this voice very clearly saying that, maybe it's time to go home. I was like, what? Go home? I don't think I'm ready to go home that yet. Where's home? I come from Taiwan original. So is it Taiwan or New Zealand or, And I came across this line from this book a lot of girls love to read. It's the Anna of Green Gable. We all watched that when we were kids, right? So, and then she said something that, she said, it's not what the world holds out to you, it's what you bring to the world, So somehow this line just struck my heart. Suddenly that just makes so much sense. Also because in 2018, I lost my brother in a kayaking accident. So it was it was such a tragedy. It was traumatic because they were on vacation, So, and I was completely heartbroken, and it actually made me think about life. And I remember there was this nurse. She works in hospice, and she wrote a book about people what they regret most at their deathbed. And then there are 5 things. I think the number one thing is they regret that they didn't do what they really love to do for fear of what other people will think. And that actually really makes sense because I come from an Asian culture. My mom is Japanese, my dad is Chinese. We were very compliant. We were very kind of more like status conscious and kind of people-pleasing kind of a culture. I mean, there are many beautiful sides of our culture. But and so at that time, I decided that I really need to change my life. I don't know what I want to do. At that time, my physical health was so terrible. I don't want to do anything. But I decided I'm going just to do things I really want to do, but what will really open my heart and make me happy. And then I realized that because I'm in New Zealand, such a beautiful place, I get to go take a walk. So anywhere I go, it's just so beautiful, the botanical garden, the small towns, the river, the beach, the woods, the fern forest. And there's just this crying inside me. I need to paint. I need to paint. I need to paint. So I just started to do very little thing, not like this big painting, just small watercolor. Every day I have a sketchbook. I just go out, and that's the only thing I manage to do. The rest of the time I just like, it's like a big blob. And but I never thought I would become like a full-time artist. So what I did was I decided to take 3 months off. Okay, I'm going to take some art lessons. So I went to Brown Art School. I went to all the art center. I started to take ceramics, printmaking, watercolor, live portrait, mixed media, everything. It's just like whatever. I just love it. Oh my God, this is so wonderful. So many wonderful teachers. I'm just going to take it. And after that 3 months, COVID happened. COVID happened. So my original plan was I was going back to Taiwan, be with my mom because, we lost my brother. But then COVID happened. It just made it so difficult to travel. So I decided, okay, it made it really easy for me to be a full-time painter now because actually perfect. So that's how I decided, I'm just going to do art and paint. And with no intention, just enjoy. And I just remember when we were doing film, everybody's desire is to create magic, right? The film is supposed to create this world of magic and super realism, just a fantasy world, and I'm no exception. But in order to make a film, for example, that $20 million project movie took us 12 years to raise the funding, 3 years to make it, 300 people, and multiple locations, studios, many fights, politics, everything. But now I got to paint. And I only need a brush, I need some paint, some canvas, and I can create magic. I can experience the magic. I just love how the paint, just drop into the water and the boom, all the things you can explore. And I have lost myself, in all these years, traveling and working so hard. And I realized, you see me painting the dance, because when I paint, I like to move. I would just I just listen to music. I just start to dance. I realized I'm a very tactile, physical, kinesthetic, and I could not do that when I was working on computer, And I realized actually, I wish I known it earlier. Actually, I'm just perfect to paint because that's how I was wired. I'm wired to like to touch things, So I was telling my friend, this is my infant stage. When you were a little kid, you need to put everything into your mouth to feel it, right? And because I haven't painted for so long, and everything is so new to me, so I'm kind of I just need to play the mud. I need to create a lot of mud. I need to just do a lot of lousy paintings and then try to make it work, So, and then so when John said, oh, you need to, you're going to share something about this digital, what kind of skills you bring to your analog. I was like, yeah, what do I bring to this? Actually, I did think about what actually I was able to bring to my painting now. I guess it was really a great training in terms of visual language, and I actually painting and film, they're so related. This is just one big family, I remember when we were doing movies, when we are working with the cameraman, the art director, we work together. We decide what the look of the movie is going to be, right? The overall aesthetics, the art direction. So we'll be looking for a lot of reference, different movies, different paintings. We really love to study Rembrandt and Vermeer because the way they portray humans, the lighting, the soft, the lighting, it's So we had a lot of inspiration from the art world. And then we need to create things like a color script, because a film is very big, but then you need to use the visual language to tell the story, to help the audience know where their eyes need to focus. It's just the same like when we are painting, we want to direct, help the audience to know where to look. So film is composed with many frames and many shots, but it's the same principle, like the color, shapes, lines, space, movement, tones, and rhythm. I think the only thing that's a little bit more stronger in film is the movement part, because your camera is moving and people are moving, and that creates a lot more, dynamic, and you need to figure out. But then the same principle in film, like the contrast versus affinity, is the same in doing art. So, I remember when we were doing this one color script for the movie, it is really fascinating. I guess at that time I was already very visual and loved doing the visual part of the work. That we have to break down the whole script, because the script has 3 acts, but there are many scenes, right? It's C-E-N-E, many scenes. You break it down, and then you assign to each scene based on its emotional content, the drama, to give it a code, a color code. For example, if it's a more peaceful, scene, we will assign it like blue. If there's a lot of fight, a lot of violence, we'll give it like red, because it's very intense, right? And then so you assign color codes for everything, and then put it back, and then you look at the script, but visually, and see how the story make you feel. Do you feel like being led into the story, and then experience the drama, and then quiet down, go into a resting place, and then have the climax and all that. So, so I think it's really a great training, and now I think I'm able to use some of the like a Photoshop digital aspect to create a reference source for my paintings. So I like, if for this type of more planning kind of a painting, I will create a reference source, digitally, so I can manipulate it. And like I like to add symbols or metaphors, so it makes it easier. But on the other side, I just love to experiment. I love to be the kid. I love to be the kid in the playground and not thinking too much, not planning, and just use my right brain. Do a lot of abstract, make a lot of bad art. That I feel it's very healthy. So, and so I feel what film that the period of doing film animation, it's give me a creative practice. I think it's very helpful, because being an artist, you want to be able to get into the flow and the creative flow easily, and then stay there as long as possible. And I think because of the creative practice, we know that you have to embrace failure. So I remember when we were training animators or actors, we used the improv theater, improvisation. And then because improvisation is all about playing drama games, and then one big principle of improv is you celebrate failure. You just celebrate, you actually say, I make a mistake again, and then you just say like everybody needs to cheer you, because the whole idea is the more you do it, the more success rate you're going to have, and also not to think, because we kind of like to overthink, but that improv just push you that immediate to respond to something. Like I throw a ball to you, you need to throw it to someone, right? You catch it, and I think I realized art is the same thing. The more you think, the worse. I mean, at least that's me. If I think too much, I cannot. I don't do very well. And so my method is I do a lot. So you probably see me keep posting. It's because that's the only way I can get better. I'm not trying to do this one, make it perfect. I'm just keep, trying to do more to get better. And that's the same principle when we were doing the script writing. And there's one thing we are saying that your first draft is a shitty draft. Just accept it. It's just going to be bad. So doesn't matter. Who cares? Just write it, let it out. Whatever it is, you just get it out, and then you can improve it, right? So and the Pixar, because they're very rich, big studio, the way they make films and to improve their movies is by making 6 or 7 versions of the storyboard, the animatic. They actually, create a storyboard, and then they will edit it into a film. I mean, it's not a full-blown, no animation, but the way they judge the movie is by watching how it play, and not by seeing or not by thinking on the script, because you will never know how it actually play out. So what we learned is the only way to get better is by doing it and doing a lot of it, and then not to worry about if this is good or bad. So I felt, even though painting is a very scary thing because I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but I can always trust that process, or I believe that process will work, and be brave, and then just go and express it. And so, so the last thing I want to share is I feel such a privilege to be able to create art here in New Zealand, and there are so many lovely artists that can support, encourage each other. And I just want to say that your art, your voice, what do you want to say to the world? What's in your heart? That volcano of emotional things you care about is so precious and so valuable. It's not less than a $20 million movie. And then we need to think that way and give ourselves the permission to create, to express and show up for each other, for ourselves and for each other. And then, I think I heard that Hitler was going to become an artist, but he didn't. So they were saying that it's easier for him to start a war than to face a blank canvas. Wow. So I think everybody here doing your creative thing, whether it's illustration, whether it's digital art, whether it's, your art therapy and art, photography, we are very brave. So cheers to everybody. Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to tonight. Thanks John for inviting me. My name's Renee, and I've been an artist, I suppose, since I was old enough to hold a pencil. Self-proclaimed artist. I grew up just doing as much as I could. I loved it. It was my favourite thing to do. So tried many different mediums. My grandmother was an acrylic painter. She did a lot of still life painting. Tried a few portraits, but I think her best thing was still life. So she taught me a few things, gave me a few introductions to new mediums and things like that. And my parents encouraged that learning. So I did a lot of work through school after classes, after school, things like that. So I learnt a lot of techniques. After going through high school, obviously doing more things like printmaking, other types of painting. I continued into the graphic design realm at university. So that's where I learnt photography, did the analogue for a little bit, and then started to develop more illustration skills. So spent a lot of time doing life drawing, which was one of my favourite activities. It could pull together quite a few inspirations I had growing up. So I talked about Disney. That was my favourite thing to watch, was those old frame by frame hand-drawn illustrations, the movement that those guys and girls could create, the colours, the storylines. That was a big influence on me, and using life drawing to replicate what those artists would have done, watching other performers do their thing, the movement, the shapes, that all played into how I developed my drawing skills. At that time, I was in an illustration class, and we talked about this book, Denise. Yes. So Maurice Shadbolt, he passed away before this manuscript came out. He was more of an adult novelist and didn't do children's books per se. So his family came across this children's book that he wrote. It was the first one, and the publisher who ended up with the manuscript came to our class, and he proposed the story to us and hoped that somebody in the class had a creative eye for what the story was. It's quite an unusual one, a mountain that's lonely. He wants to live with the rest of the people in the village that he sees having a good time. So that mountain moving scares everyone away, and how is that mountain going to fit into a house? So it comes to life in the story really well, where he ends up being a painted image inside this boy's home. So it's a really cute story. But how do you draw a mountain that has feelings and moves? So through that illustration background and the influences of Disney and this kind of storytelling, I was able to come up with a bit of a script or a storyboard with a final illustration. It was very similar to this, a lot more blue and calming in colours, but we ended up with this instead after he selected me to produce the illustrations for that book. Leading on after that, he asked me to do another children's book, so that was the extent of how far I went through illustrating at about that time. After I'd finished university, I tried to get into the graphic design industry. It was very difficult at that time. I couldn't even get a job by volunteering, so I really struggled with not finding a job, thinking that going to do graphic design would have helped me instead of, which I really wanted to do, was go to Elam or do visual art at university, and I chose to go down the graphic design path. It gave me a lot of skills. Photoshop skills, Illustrator skills, vector. So that was really helpful, but I still couldn't get a job. So did a few odds and ends working for my father in a plant nursery. I worked at a bookbinding establishment for a little bit of time. That was really hard work. And then eventually decided to pursue a bit of a sport and go over to Canada and spend 6 months teaching snowboarding and skiing. So yeah, it really took me away from my creative side, which I loved. But because I'd struggled trying to find a job, it was really wearing me down emotionally and mentally, creatively. It just took its toll. So I needed to go do something else. So that 6 months was amazing. I loved it, and I'd recommend to anyone to do something like that if that's what they're into. When I came home, I was still in the same dilemma. What am I going to do? Like, I've got these skills, I know that I can use them. And so I was thinking going back to study and maybe be a teacher at high school for art or printmaking or something. Or do I pursue a physical, active career for a little bit of time since I was 25 when I made that decision. But I ended up joining the Defence Force, and in particular the Air Force. So I've been there ever since. I'm still there. I joined as a Force Protection Specialist, which was basically security specialist. So we'd look after the personnel, the aircraft, the base, do that at home and overseas. So I'd travel quite a bit with the Air Force doing that. In my current role, I've transitioned into being a survival instructor. So I teach the aircrew survival skills for that worst case scenario, yeah. Before transitioning though across to that role, I did a few deployments. So we did go over to Afghanistan one time when I was quite early in my career. So that was a big eye-opener, like how much I didn't know. So when I transitioned to the survival school, I was like, oh my goodness, if anything bad had happened, I knew now what I needed to actually go through, and it's not nice. So trying to teach that to all the aircrew has been really important to me, and it's been a passion of mine. So I love doing that job. I still love it. However, I also love this stuff too. So I've been trying to find the balance, because now my family, we're building our family, so I want to take some ownership back on the time that I spend working and what I can give back to my family. So when the lockdowns happened, it was almost my saving grace that I could get back into my art. And I'd bought this amazing device just prior to the lockdowns, and purchasing the Procreate app. I know that Denise, you've used it. Anyone else use the Yeah, it's amazing. So using some of the skills I learned at university with graphic design, I could then apply them to this medium. However, now the technology's improved, and actually drawing on the screen that shows what you're doing rather than screens up here and you're drawing down here just seems so foreign. So using all the traditional media that I had grown up with, I could then try and find the programs and the paintbrushes and the textures and the colours on the digital platform and try and use that as best I could to replicate it. This time, however, I find that going from the traditional media, when you've got a blank canvas, you've got all your paints there, starting is so hard, like knowing what's going to go on the canvas, but once you get inspired, it starts to come to life. Then you hit that middle period in your painting, don't you? And it's just like, I hate it, I don't know where I was going with it. And then you put it away for a period of time. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of determination to pick it up and get going again. So I've had so many failures with traditional media stuff to eventually get some really good gems in my body of work. But now that I've got this iPad, still got so many failures, but the whole process goes quicker, I find. So if I could show you all some of the traditional media works I've done. So, well, you can pass those around. So that one is fully traditional media. That was a commission. This one is mostly traditional media, just acrylic on canvas, and then I've retouched it using the tablet. So because I couldn't capture a great photograph of that particular piece of art, I've then used the tablet to digitally retouch it just to make sure it looks like how I intended. And then Denise, we also talked about that one too. So using my traditional media, I drew a sketch from a photo of this subject here, and gouache was what I used. So the image was in colour, and then when I took a photograph of it on the tablet, changed it to black and white, so I've got the textures that I really wanted, but then I could start to paint over top. So that's how I produced that one. And the whole process is so fun, it's so fluid. You can change settings to change the colours, find the right balance, find the right mood to each image. So I've just been enjoying experimenting and playing with the digital media. And because I had quite a few people interested in that particular poster or that particular piece, I created posters, and that's how I met John. Was coming here, and I really wanted to try and capture the digital on a nice paper stock, because that tactile, rich colour was important to me still, and I think it really shows in the quality that what you guys can produce here and what your customer ends up receiving. I still love the tactileness of traditional media, but it's just the convenience of our now modern age that digital can produce what I needed it to. So the lockdown being what it was, and having the iPad at that time, I was in a tiny apartment and I couldn't house canvases and leave things up, have all my paints there and make a mess like I would otherwise. So nice and clean on a tablet and just my couch, like it was convenient at that time. So producing that first print and having a lot of interest, it's kind of spurred me on to continue, and so we've produced a few more over that time. So inspired by things that I saw on digital media at that time, so Instagram, Facebook, there's a lot of sketches coming out, and I thought I could try and replicate sketches but on the digital platform. So that's an example of just something I tried to create looking like a traditional pencil sketch. These ones, it's a good example to show how I could use the layers of the program to create two very different images, but using similar elements that I could copy and paste. So it shows that you can produce things quite quick and make a series of work. This was the first one that I created, and it took a long time. A lot of hours went into planning the composition and whatnot, and then finding the brushes and the colours that I really liked. But once I'd done that, it was quite easy to then replicate a second version of it. And I'll just show you, if you'd like to see, a little short clip of how that one was created. Forgive the fingerprints, it gets so messy so quick. So using lots of images, not only things from the internet, but photographs I've taken, sketches I've had, placing out a composition, drawing an outline, and then we'll get to it. Just putting a flat backdrop in and starting to build those layers as you would traditionally with a canvas. That's how I tend to work. Everyone's a little bit different, but using the layers of the program as if I was actually painting is my approach to how I do the digital as well. We'll speed it up a little bit. There's a lot of experimentation in this because this is one of my first larger pieces. So there'll be a lot of back and forth, checking that colours are right or changing things out. And then when doing the final touches, the highlights, my favourite part in a painting, it's also my favourite part on here too, is doing those details. So you see when the photograph appeared next to it, it was me referencing as I was drawing. Yeah. Yeah, so that's that one, just to give you an example. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's my journey up until probably the second lockdown, and then since then it's started to transform, going back to sketches using the digital platform, and I'm starting to create tattoo designs now. So tattooing is now my new medium of choice to actually apply to skin, and my tactile art coming back through. But it's also me trying to be smart in terms of my transition out of the Air Force. At some stage, I have a business to go to that I can do both the digital, and I have a tactile medium to go to. So it's something in development at the moment, and I have tattooed probably up to 30 people so far. So still, yeah, a work in progress, and it will be for years to come, but hopefully this will be my new career at some stage soon. So yeah. I will show you a few images if you'd like to see of the types of designs that I'm doing. So sticking with my theme of nature. So these are my sketches on a model, just to try and show composition and the intent of placement. I don't know if you can see. So I can take my sketch, just a simple black and white line drawing, and then use the multiply function to apply it to another photograph underneath.
After you design it, do you actually do the work?
Yeah, I'll show you some, eh? How about we go there?
That's another.
Very. So it's definitely something that requires a lot of focus, and traditional media, I know you've got as much time as you want to spend on a painting, but this is really putting the pressure on me, as I've got someone there in pain that I need to have a plan and focus. So unlike painting, I'm having to fast track my process, and I'm trying to learn that as well without being flustered in front of someone.
Is it not stressful?
Oh, it is stressful, but you don't try not to portray it. Yes, so
You have enough survival skills.
tactical breathing. Yep, get through it. Okay, where did I put my folder? Oh no. There we go. So we'll start from here.
Wow. You didn't start small, did you?
No, well, this is one of my most recent ones. So it was in two parts, where I started with the flowers, because I'd done flowers quite a bit, and then I got this client to come back, and we did the mandala piece. So also learning how long things take. Everybody's this one. I think if I collectively put all the hours together, about 10 hours. Yeah. So I'm still learning, and I'm sure I'm going to get faster at it too.
Oh, stunning. Do you numb the area before you start or not?
I can do, but it only lasts for like an hour or so. So if it's a small tattoo in a really sore place, like, yes, of course I can do that, yeah. But it's not a long-term solution for something that's a bit larger. So the person getting the tattoo really needs to be committed to it, yeah.
How the body is that?
That was a hip.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's quite a more recent style based on what technology is available. So machines used to be like rudimentary, bulky things that had a tapered edge to hold the needle inside, and it just had a rotating switch that the needle just ended up going up and down, quite loud. And then now that they're transitioning, they can be into like a pen form, and everything, the motor's internal, and it's just like a big chunky vivid. They can be with a cord to the power supply or cordless. So that's where I want to go, is cordless at some stage soon, so that I have freedom of movement. But there's pros and cons to everything. Needle sizes change, the shape, the orientation of the needles all change. It's just like any other medium, the different brushes you have used for different strokes, the hardness of those bristles used for different effects. So tattooing's kind of similar, but you've also got a canvas that the skin changes, thinness of it, placement needs to be stretched and taut. So using both hands, there's a lot of things involved.
Do you usually sketch? With what do you use to stencil?
A stencil? Stencil. I don't have any images of a stencil, I don't think. No, sorry, I don't have. It's just basically carbon paper and applying a layer of the solution that takes that carbon and leaves it on the skin is what I use, yeah. Where's this one? Oh. Yeah, it's so good. It's hard for me because I'm a perfectionist, so I spend more time checking over everything as well to try and get the best I can from what I know right now, and hopefully as I work and continue to work on things, I'll be more accurate with it from the get-go and trust myself more. Yeah.
So did you go to a school to learn all this?
No, so that's where like social media has been my big influence since lockdown. Trying to observe what other people do, so learn from watching how quick their hand moves or what needles they're using by what they're displaying on their profiles. Also signing up to a few lessons, but it's all digital videos and things like that, so I don't have that one-on-one coaching, so I'm having to critique myself as best I can and try and talk to other artists where possible. It's just a bit harder with the restrictions at the moment because I don't want to go into a studio and kind of demand attention when they're limiting people. So I had that opportunity in between some lockdowns to talk to a couple of artists at a studio that I really respect and I really like their work. So that was
quite brave to have people. You're brave enough to say, I'm going to do it on your skin.
Wow.
yeah.
Like the canvas,
Yeah.
Yeah, bin it if it didn't work.
If it doesn't work.
So yeah, in saying that, the process of traditional media and just going at a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas and just seeing what happens is fun, it's enjoyable, and that's where I can apply it to my design work and just have fun pulling things together on that flat 2D space. But as soon as I transition to working on a person, that's a completely different thing as well. So I have to be very conscious about, is the design right? Is it in the right place? Have I applied the stencil right? Is it going to work for that person? And can I achieve it within the time frame and have a solid plan? So that's really making me more like methodical in how I do things. But yeah,
Also when it's using the needle on the person, how they react, it's also very different on working. It's so different.
Yeah.
Almost the extreme opposite of a very, hard surface.
Yeah. So that's again on a hip, that one. So yeah, if I trust my design and I know my design is good, I'm more comfortable going into a tattoo that I'm not too sure what my technique's going to be, because I have to adapt to the canvas essentially and how their skin reacts. So yeah, it's quite stressful, but it's exciting at the same time. So there's a lot of the same in here. That was a nice one to do.
How long did it take to do that lioness one?
I think about 6 hours to do the floral piece and the outline of that lion, but I had to get her to come back to me to do the shading part, because that was another couple of hours to do that.
Lots of people do that though, right? Just wait on the shading.
Yeah. So lining is the most important. Once the stencil goes down, you need to, it's essentially tracing at that point, but trying to apply all these techniques so that the needle puts the ink into the skin in the right spots. If you go even like half a mil too deep, it blows out underneath and you see the bleeding, like as in the ink going through the layers. And so that's the worst thing. So yeah. Yeah, I do find it quite, I feel bad, like when someone's in pain and I have to go over a certain area because it didn't quite work with the line. But yeah, it's all part of that process that they should expect pain. But I'm just trying to be so delicate because I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you did.
How many donors did you have?
I had quite a few people volunteer at the start, and I was just doing it for nothing. I just was wanting experience. So anybody willing to come and trust me. There's a handful, probably a good 10 or so people. And then once I started to build my confidence, it was like just a gift of some sort. Someone would bring me like a bottle of wine or flowers, or they'd give me a little bit of cash. Then as I got more experience, then I was like, okay, I think I'm worth about this much an hour. And then now it's got to the point I'll charge for the design, and then I'll charge for the time the appointment is. So I think that's...
So Renee, have you given yourself any tattoos?
No.
Have you got any tattoos?
I do. I've got some snowflakes on the side of my ribs.
Okay.
That was painful. Yeah.
That's good.
So that's my empathy coming through, yeah. As an example of process, my client sent me this photo of her, and she'd done the circle of where she'd wanted the tattoo, and then I started coming up with my sketches and placing it, and then I'd send that back to her and she'd give me some feedback on, oh no, that's too high, I'd like that in the centre and whatnot. So that was the start of the process for me. Yeah. Depending on how busy I get, based on the things that I've talked to other artists about and what I can gather from what they portray on social media, is that they're so busy that they can only the day of the appointment provide the image. So only at that time the client can say no, or just some minor changes. But for me at the moment, it's important that I have the design that the client is happy with. So that's just how I'm operating for now until I get to that point of being, hopefully, so busy that I can't do that anymore. Yeah. Yeah, I've got quite a few designs in here, but you've seen the most recent ones, the ones I really want to do. Yeah. Cute little one there. So I'd like to do that one day, if anyone's willing. But yeah. I totally agree with you, Coral, about the whole blank canvas is quite daunting. But once you start, you have the fun. You just need to start. Yeah. Yeah, that's always been my hardest thing, is once you get given something blank, like you could do anything with it. And my my fear was always having something rubbish, so it was hard to start if I hadn't got an idea or an inspiration. As soon as I had inspiration, boom, get on the page. If it didn't look that good, I refined and refined. Or if somebody else has produced something that you're inspired by, you've at least got something to start with and you can develop your own version. But yeah, that blank canvas is the most daunting bit. Yeah.
Is that the same digitally as well?
I think so. Like, it's not as hard digitally because you can import an image or do a quick few lines and be like, I don't quite like that, and just backspace, go again. Whereas, yeah, with a piece of paper, you've spent a lot of money on materials. It's harder to, I suppose, waste things and have large artworks around your home that you're not happy with. So as much as I love, the traditional stuff, I find I can condense everything and I can keep things tidy here, and I can make a mess through my files on my iPad, but it's just there. I don't have to go clean up anything. So that's just the pros that I've found. Yeah, or if I'm not sure I want to change an image, I suppose this is a good example. Actually, I'll show you. So if I have an idea and I think I've finished the painting, but I want to develop it into something else, I can just copy that whole file and then play with the new file, and I haven't ruined the original. Okay, so this one as an example, probably should have got you to print this one, John. So I love the red background. I was going for the kind of Christmassy Pahutakawa look with the pattern in the background. And then I went to this really out the gate kind of galaxy with the Southern Cross in the background, just playing with what might suit that particular subject. So easy copy paste that main subject and just play with the background. So.
And sorry, what's the software that you work in?
This app is called Procreate, and so you can just make a new canvas, new one. The size could be anything. The larger you go in terms of scale, the more data it's going to need. So the less layers you can do, the bigger you go. So if you went to A3, you might only be able to have, say, 10 layers, whereas the smaller it is, you could have probably 50, 60 layers quite easy. And most of these are A4, and they've managed to print really well up to A1. Yeah, so quite easy to set up a new one, and you can name your file so that when you do save it, you can save it as a JPEG, a PNG, so you have the background being transparent and you just have the lines that you've drawn. You could also save it as a Photoshop file or a Procreate file, which has all the layers stored for you, so you can go back or send it to someone else and they can edit things. So yeah, I really like this program, and real cheap. Yeah, less than $20. Well, at the time I got it anyway, so yeah. But the other thing that it's doing now is that it's going to 3D. So you can draw on 3D objects. I mean, I don't think you can draw 3D here. You can get the model and then draw on top of it to give it the textures and the colours. But yeah, different program altogether. So these ones were just free samples, but to get other models you'd have to pay quite a bit of money to other artists that do like CAD work, I think, or other software that's 3D. Yeah. Yeah, so those are just examples there. So product design. Pretty easy. And that is my picture.